What you're going to hear in this video is a recording of a lecture by Jaclyn Friedman called "What Does Feminism Have to Do with It?" And it's essentially about rape culture and rape culture on college campuses. Now, this particular lecture was originally supposed to be attended by Adele Mercier, but she dropped out. This lecture by Jaclyn Friedman was attended by several men's rights activists who attended the lecture specifically to bring it to attention to the rape apologia that Adele Mercier engaged in by characterizing the sexual relationship between juvenile boys in a detention facility and their adult female captors as being unproblematic, uncoerced, and basically consensual, that it was a result of the boys' choices rather than the women's predatory behavior. The men's rights activists went to this lecture, they listened, and they waited patiently for a Q&A session in order to bring attention to this rape apologia. And the lecture was on rape culture on campus. Now, in part on rape culture on campus. Now, you could imagine that a professor espousing views that constitute rape apologia would be part of a rape culture on campus, but apparently not. Apparently they can't spend any time on that.
The reason why I'm here today is because we came to speak about the Adele Mercier situation. Jaclyn, I know you don't know about it, so I won't question you about it, but she made some pretty nasty comments online about consent with regards to consent in juvenile facilities. She said that if juveniles weren't forced into sex, it wasn't really rape. That was the tone of what she said. Now, I don't think anybody in this room, anybody, would find that acceptable. Hands up, anybody here who finds that acceptable. Look at that, not a single hand.
Can I say one thing to that?
Yeah.
As someone whose words have been taken wildly out of context by...
We have our quotes there.
Thank you, and I think that you raised a really great point. Like, thank you very much for bringing it up.
I just wanted to make one more... I hadn't quite finished, just if I may. Please.
That quickly. We are on a limited time.
I just hadn't finished my point. The point I was trying to make, though, if I may, please.
Too much space.
I'm terribly sorry. If people stop interrupting me, I'll be quick.
So what you just listened to was a group of feminists essentially ignoring the fact that there is a rape apologist in their midst and failing to call her out. And in the original recording, you'll also hear some feminists talk about the man box and how men aren't able to access their feelings of vulnerability in regards to sexual assault. Asking if masculine culture is toxic to men and boys is like asking, is scarring toxic to the body? Scarring is how we prevent ourselves from bleeding to death, how our bodies prevent us from bleeding to death. It's in response to damage. Just like the so-called man box or toxic masculinity is in response to a society that has utterly and completely failed men and boys when they're vulnerable, in particular when they're sexually violated by women. And what you've just listened to is an example of that failure. These feminists are failing to call out rape apologia in their midst. And the reason why they're failing to do that is because it targets men and boys. And these are the people, this is the ideology, this is the group of people that society has decided should have authority over rape, over the discourse on rape. That is an example of society's abject failure in protecting men and boys. Abject failure in recognizing their vulnerability or caring about it or recognizing that they can be violated sexually by women. That recording is an example. When you're in a situation where you have been assaulted, that is just a situation where one person has treated you as worthless. But if you're a man who's been assaulted by a woman, to recognize the assault as an assault, you have to recognize not just that your female rapist treated you as worthless, but that all of society does as well. Because all of society would rather portray you as a rapist than a rape victim. They care more about your potential to violate women than your potential to be violated. And that is an incredible betrayal. So you wonder why male rape victims laugh or deny or minimize? Well, they do because they have no choice. Because the other choice is to acknowledge that you and all of society don't give a shit. And part of the evidence that society doesn't give a shit is that these women who are invested in minimizing and hiding the sexual abuse of men and boys by women have been invested with the authority to talk about rape. These women who promote feminism, well, men and women, feminists, who promote the idea of male privilege and patriarchy and rape culture, have been given the right to talk about rape, and in so doing, consistently minimize the scope and the pain of male victims. There's no greater lack of privilege than being part of a group that society doesn't care, like is completely indifferent, and it doesn't even think that you can be raped. That's where men are at. Our society doesn't even acknowledge that they can be raped. It doesn't even consider male sexuality to have any value, that men should have any right to not consent to women. That's where men are at. That is such a position of incredible lack of privilege. It's unspeakable. And yet these people will assert that men have privilege, that men are invulnerable, that rape isn't a men's rights issue.